Aaron Stelle here with West, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Graham Marden with Premier Property Group, who has been one of the top two floating homes salespeople in the state of Oregon for 23 straight years. So that's quite the accomplishment there, Graham.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a fun ride, and that has 25 years total selling floating homes. So I really enjoy it out there on the river. It's a great experience.
So just kind of to get a quick little start here, like how do you get into selling floating homes? Like how did that happen?
It happened through accident by virtue of a friend that I've known for 44 years now and wanted to sell his floating home. And so I took it on. And even though that particular listing didn't sell, because he changed his mind and he decided, I don't want to sell after all. And I recently asked him if he would ever want to sell it. And he said, Graham, I'm leaving here feet first in a pine box. So I don't think he'll be wanting to sell anytime soon, but it's morphed from there. And I'm very, very happy with this being my niche market in real estate.
You know, and so you bring that up. It's funny. I talked to a lot of agents over the years, and almost all of them to a person say, I don't even want to touch that. Like, I would rather just refer that out. So like, what are the nuances and pitfalls that make a floating home different than a standard home?
Well, they certainly are different from the get-go, starting with the fact that they're personal property, not real. And as a result, there's only 3 lenders that offer purchase loans specific to this property in the Portland area. And there are many nuances that go along with getting a loan, just like they are as being a separate entity and property-wise. So there's the 3 lenders. There's only 2 float inspectors that are on those 3 lenders approved list. There's only 1 appraiser, and there's about 5 licensed contractors who work on floats themselves. So it's kind of a small world out there, and I've gotten to know everybody involved from one aspect from the beginning to the end of a sale of a floating home.
So, you know, with such restrictions, only 3 banks, the 1 appraiser, all that kind of stuff, how hard is it to actually get financing or to actually buy one compared to a regular house?
Well, as I like to say, it's easy if you meet all the requirements, which quite frankly is you need a minimum 20% down payment. You'll essentially from there have to just have your income to debt ratios, credit score. What you can't get on the river would be an FHA or VA loan that are less than 20% down payment. So that's really the major mark and the major difference in terms of financing. I would say that for probably at least the past 15 years, approximately half of my sales have been all cash. So that obviously eliminates the need of outlenders altogether. And it's just very interesting out there.
Well, so since, you know, obviously the Portland housing market has been going crazy for, you know, going on 6-8 years now, and it's just been constantly appreciating. Are you seeing the same thing in floating homes, or is it a little bit different?
It certainly caught the tidal wave when the land market had a red hot feeding frenzy to it. It did spill over to the river. And I would say the past maybe couple of years, not as much of a dramatic rise as on land. It's kind of holding its own. And for people who say, well, if floating homes are personal property, then they must not appreciate. And that's incorrect. And I always say, well, in that case, how come they cost so much more now than 10 or 20 years ago? So they'll follow the overall real estate market, which of course is going to be tied to the economy. I can say that we did have a big slowdown, you know, in beginning of March, and through most of March, it was slow. And then for, I'd say, the past 6 or 7 weeks, it really picked up. And there's been a lot of activity across the board, including for me.
So, with that, I would look at floating homes as kind of it's a different lifestyle choice. So when you're out there meeting clients and you're talking to people, like who does it usually appeal to?
Well, interesting. You hit the key word, which is lifestyle. And that's it, pure and simple. It's not like any other lifestyle. You want to live on the river, and whether it's because you're an avid boater, fisher person, enjoy wildlife, which you're inclined to see more of from the vantage point of the river, all that is what makes it so special and unique. And that's what also draws me to enjoy working on it, and enjoy people. Not only are about half of my sales cash, but almost half of my buyers I come across are from out of state. And I find that very interesting. So I'm meeting people from literally all over, and not just our border states, but, Arizona. And I like to always say, you'll be able to beat the summer heat by having a home on the river in Portland, and then elsewhere across the country. I sold a home a few years ago to a couple from Boston, and my first meeting, was via Skype, and then we went on from there. But I really enjoy that, and ultimately people want that, and sometimes it's a second home. Floating homes are oftentimes a kind of a retreat and literally a summer place, and for many of the snowbirds who like to migrate south in the winter, like to have a nice home on the river for the summer.
That makes a lot of sense. And so if you're looking at getting started in the process and you're like, what, this seems like it could be kind of fun. What are the first steps? What should somebody do that's interested in getting into a floating home?
Well, I like to go through what I call my Floating Home 101 class with people who are just looking at floating homes. And I will do this every single week. There's virtually a week that doesn't go by without me going through that tutorial on a 1, 2, 3 basis of what to look for. And I do it all the time on the phone. So in a sense, as far as COVID goes, and as terrible as that affliction is, and what we're dealing with across, not just in our business, but across America, my personal change has been fairly minor, and I'm still doing most of all my work via phone, text, email, etc. So that is a big part of it as I go through that opening round of explaining the nuances of a floating home, from financing and whether you own the slip and you're part of an HOA paying an HOA fee, or if you're renting the slip from a private owner operator and thus paying a rental fee for the slip. So, and they're about equal, by the way. They're about half with slip ownership and an HOA, and about half that are in rental mortgages.
Is there a benefit? Obviously, if you have an HOA, I guess you'd have a deed, but is there a benefit to one or the other?
Well, to be fair, in the HOA realm, you have the ownership. You're inherently likely to be paying a little more for a commensurate valued home because of including the slip and the cost. Your monthly fees are lower with an HOA. You elect a board of directors. It's going to be very similar to how most condos are run on land in that regard. And then you do, to be fair and balanced, when you write a rental check, you don't have any other cost involved. If you're in an HOA, again, similar to a townhome or condo, you're going to be responsible for maintaining the grounds and all. And you may, on rare occasions, have an assessment, but that's the biggest difference. And so it can it can fit different people for different purposes and reasons.
Which makes a lot of sense. So one last question, and I'll get you out of here. In regards to marketing and trying to get additional exposure, is there anything that you do specifically for floating homes that you wouldn't necessarily do for a site build place?
Well, it may not be necessarily different, but I have a floating home website that has proven to be extremely effective. And I know it gets a huge amount of traffic. And for especially those people out of state, out of area, they're contacting me through the floating home site. And that is just a marvelous tool. So no matter where people are, if they're looking for floating homes in Portland, Oregon, they'll invariably find me. And that's been a great benefit for my, not only the buyers, but also my seller clients as well.
And what is, just so, you know, if people are looking or they just kind of want to peruse around and see the inventory, what is your website?
So it's Oregon-floating-homes.com. And I've had it for 17 years. And thanks to you, Aaron, I also was one of the first agents on the river to utilize videos and on YouTube, which is now a standard fare for a long time. But also thanks to you, I got into using drone photography and videos. And I know I was the first realtor on the river that started using that many years ago. So you and WFG have been a big help in my business as well. And I want to thank you and everybody in the team.
I really appreciate that, Graham. You know, and I do, you know, I remember kind of at the beginning when you did dip your toe in the water. You just dove in head first and you're like, nope, I'm going to start building out some lifestyles to show how these different mortgages and stuff work. And I'm excited to see that you continued to progress with that.
Well, and thanks for the continued ideas and tips. So I look forward to, I'm enjoying seeing you right now, and I'll enjoy seeing you in person when the time is right.
I look forward to that as well. Well, thanks a lot for your time, my man. I really do appreciate it, and congrats on your continued success.
Well, thank you very much, and you enjoy the duration of the day.